in those days, Chinese is pretty well cannot work for any white people. They won't take you. That's discrimination against the Chinese, and they won't take you. Just like in my case, in my days, hockey players were not paid like they were paid now. I was a hockey player, but I went to make a team to get a job, to make myself a living, and there the discrimination on me was, they always say that the head office don't want Chinese to work for us, and I can't work.
Well, my father, I know that he shared a lot of stories about how difficult it was for him as an Asian person of Asian descent, how he had to suffer through a lot of racist incidents. We related one incident with some elderly Chinese man was in what is considered now the downtown Nissan, East Hastings and Gore Street, and he was being robbed by some young white thugs at the time. My father stepped in, and and I think there was an police officer, and they just turned a blind eye and just let this incident happen. My father tried to stop it, and he says that he shouted and yelled, and they just actually weren't even scared. But he said that sort of feeling he developed, that there really was no true justice as he grew up.
And even though I'm of mixed heritage myself, I remember as a child, and this bothered me tremendously for years, that we came home from school crying one day because they called us yellow ice cream, which was the funniest thing to call us yellow ice cream, but it bothered me because I knew the intent behind it really was anti-Chinese sentiment.
Believe it or not, to this day I still feel it, that there was that discrimination, and it makes you don't have the confidence of doing things.
Probably the thing that struck me the most is my dad gave it away, but on his birth certificate it said born in Canada, not a Canadian citizen. That struck me the hardest. Okay, he's born here.
They couldn't go to English school. They weren't allowed to go to English school. So my grandmother, which is Ngsi's daughter, oldest daughter Kate, she didn't know how to read or write in English. So but she was very, all the children were, and all the girls too, were very well versed in Chinese. So even though there was no English school for them, they learned to read and write well in Chinese.
So when he came back, all right, and then they said to him, well, you're Chinese. You can't be an engineer. He says, I want to go to university. You know, it's promised, you serve in the forces, you're supposed to get education out of it. Well, no, what do you want to take engineering for? You won't be allowed to be an engineer. What do you want to be a doctor for? You can't be a doctor. We're not going to professionally license you, or a lawyer. So ended up, 3 brothers that went overseas ended up being tailors. So there was that bar that you couldn't, you couldn't do a lot of things.
When the war broke out, he wanted to join to serve his country. He was very patriotic that way, but at that time when he went to the office to sign up, they said that they couldn't allow him to register because he was Chinese, which was kind of unusual at the time because he was a member of the BC Dragoons and he had a gun. Yet they wouldn't let him join the Air Force. And I think this was quite prevalent with a lot of Chinese people that wanted to join when the war first broke out. So then I know that he sent a letter to the Prime Minister complaining and stuff like that. He really wanted to join. And eventually he was allowed to join. So he finally got in the Air Force and he was stationed in Winnipeg, I think in Rivers, Manitoba, and he was a wireless operator, and they basically flew training flights. So he never did get to go overseas, though he wanted to. I think he was proud to be a Canadian, and I think he was certainly very so proud that he would do so much to get in, but I don't think he was any different than any other Chinese people that signed up for the services during the war. You know, they had come over or they were born here. This was their country. Their country was in need, and they were going to do their best to be a Canadian.
But the fact was that these people were trained and they were willing to die for the country. But the sad thing was that many of them never saw action because the war finished before they were sent in to do the job. And if they were sent in, there would be huge casualties because they were sent in the front lines to do the sabotage and also to create the environment for the eventual landing. They came back as heroes, and they in some ways took on the mantle. And they were ones that said, we got the vote. We actually voted during the war. And now that we're back, we have the right now to go to government and ask for that for the rest of our people.